Oh, blimey. Thank you, and Kalimera, I think, or Kalispera. So, good morning or good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here again in the city of Athens. I think London today is back to wind, rain, and cloud, so I'll stay here for as long as you'll have me. For those that don't know me, my name's Craig Gosnell. I've been at Fitch about 15 years. And 3 or 4 years ago, we started Sustainable Fitch, which do the sort of ESG ratings, second-party opinions, and other sort of related products and research. So my aim is to not answer questions about the ECB, which I think just came up, but maybe questions about ESG. So I'll provide a sort of 10, 12-minute update, and hopefully leave time for questions via Slido. I only have 2 slides, so we're on one of 2. There's 6 sort of key trends that we've picked up on. ESG data and reporting requirements, SFDR, the Sustainable Finance Directive reporting, regulation on ESG rating providers, and then we're going to talk about, in the second half, we're going to talk about sustainable debt markets, transition finance, transition planning, and EU Green Bond Standard. They all share similar characteristics, I suppose, in essence. They're all about building the 3 Ts, genuinely. So the trust, transparency, whilst transitioning. So that's at the core of what's happening in sustainable finance and ESG at the moment. I think in the first, 2017 to 2022-ish, a lot of hype, a lot of publicity, a lot of growth. And now it's more in that, how do we continue to funnel and orientate capital into sustainable impact? So not just badges or labels, but real outcomes. On the ESG data and reporting side, 2023 was a really big year for standard setting. So the regulators continued to get very tough on ESG disclosure. With the creation of I'll try to not do the alphabet soup, which is in ESG. I'll try and explain them. The International Sustainable Standards Board, otherwise known as the ISSB, to create a parallel or an equivalent to IFRS in financial accounting. The clock is also ticking on the first batch of companies covered by the Corporate Sustainable Reporting Directive, otherwise known as the CSRD, who are busy working this year to report for fiscal year, or against fiscal year 2024 in March, April next year. This includes, it's a huge scope of companies. So in the first sort of batch, it includes 50,000 companies approximately based in Europe, and another 10,000 that are based outside of Europe. So 60,000 companies, equivalent to around 75% of the total European corporate or company revenue. There's a few big focuses. Please do, if you're in, I guess most people here are in Treasury, reach out to your ESG sustainability team, check in on them. They're quite up to here with the work and the burden. Usually a smaller team, let's say, so capacity constraints, capacity issues. And I think that will continue to play out because the CSRD is a sort of grandfathered program over the next 3, 5, 6 years. So the large, the mid-caps, the smaller companies, they have more time. But generally speaking, they haven't got 20, 30 people in a sustainable finance or sustainability team. And it's a big effort and a burden to get some of this reporting requirements implemented and operated and working properly within the company. So reach out to them and offer your condolences or help. And ultimately, it's about implementation for those bigger companies. So a lot of, I suppose, pressure, if you like, on reporting. And, that can be both positive and negative. But the implementation of all of this standard setting and what it's actually going to do to drive sustainable impact, performance, and outcomes against the commitments, the pledges, the targets, the plans. And that's really, really key. And a lot of people are quite hopeful that that sustainability reporting and doing the work that's required will really focus the minds of what needs to be done and what's material for different sectors and regions in the economy. There's also, I guess, an open question around the accountability for sustainability reporting. You've got typically sort of chief financial officers, group treasury, finance, capital market, financial reporting, and then you've got sort of ESG sustainability departments, sustainability reporting, and how those divisions, teams collaborate, how they find their way, who's ultimately responsible for sustainability reporting. Is it the sustainability office? Is it the financial teams? Is it a blend? So that's some of the things that we're seeing when we sort of travel around. On the sustainable, on SFDR, that's been the sort of gift that kind of keeps on giving in Europe. It's really, really important in terms of orientating capital to sustainable businesses and improving transparency and sustainability. There's potentially some, I guess, revisions within the SFDR, principally around the labeling. For those that know, they're often referred to as Article 6, 8, and 9 in sort of essence, as sort of very green, light green, and not so green buckets. But that hasn't had the outcomes that it sort of was intended to. So potentially revising the labelings and looking to sort of harmonise standards across Europe and the UK. There's also potentially these sustainability risks that come in and how they're emphasised in what's called the PAIs, the Principal Adverse Indicators. There is also going to be a stronger alignment in the SFDR with the EU taxonomy. The last section here on ESG, the regulation of ESG data or rating providers. I think a lot of people, if we did a poll now, would categorically say it's needed, it's required. There is a plethora of ESG raters who operate somewhat sort of from their own decision or their own sort of focus or their own methodologies, their own practices. Obviously, we've got a fairly good line of sight, both in how we think ratings should be done, having been part of Fitch and Fitch Group and Fitch Ratings, but also what the regulator's really going to drive for. And I think for a lot of companies, you only have to look at maybe some of the bigger companies. Someone's job is to respond to various information requests, questionnaires from various data rating providers, get a score or a rating that they're not always sure what it says, what the methodology is, and how they use it, and then they interpret that in language that isn't similar to how you've just seen Alex explain credit ratings. So there is various scales of letters and numbers working in different directions of high and low, and it's very hard for investors to use those ratings in the way that they typically use credit ratings to assess relative probability of default. The regulator is, so if we've seen some consolidation, I guess, in the number of rating providers, we definitely will see more, because the regulator, in order to be a provider of ratings, you need to be registered with ESMA. So that creates a decision, effectively, for all rating agencies, whether they want to go down that path or not. It's not a free ride, both in terms of the scrutiny, the regulation, the cost, the performance of your ratings. So Alex and other people at Fitch have had to stand up for 15, 20 years and explain the ratings and justify where they're rating different companies. In ESG, there is a lot of lofty ratings, very high, which is fine, but you also need to justify those, not you as a company, but the rating agency. So if they rate people AAA now, but we're still 10, 15 years away from the sort of 1.5 degree Paris aligned outcomes, there's a bit of a challenge. So what are the ratings measuring, how they're measuring, what are their methodologies, their weights, their processes, the governance and controls in producing ratings. So you can expect over the next 12, 18 months, quite a change within the rating landscape. And if you couple that with the first section, how do ratings evolve with sustainability reporting now being more assured, verified, complete, just like financial reporting? So using the data that's published to provide your opinion, insights, and developing sustainability ratios, like people developed financial ratios all those years ago. The last three sort of topics are around sort of sustainable debt markets. I guess between sort of 2007-ish, the first sort of green bond being done, Quite exponential growth in the sort of 2010 to 2020 period. 2021 was a record year, just over $1 trillion of what's referred to as labeled bonds. So they are mostly made up of green, social, sustainability, and sustainability-linked instruments. Although, like everything in ESG, there is always new. I think we've seen blue and orange, so ocean and gender diversity. But sustainable debt markets continue to be quite a core part of the fixed income capital markets. So regardless of your opinion on or your view on sustainability or ESG, they are about 20% of overall fixed income capital markets. So about $1 trillion a year of labeled bonds, and that's incrementally increasing year on year. And the same as Alex and others have commented on, the same challenges have been out there in the last couple of years with geopolitical uncertainties, sort of macroeconomic headwinds and rising interest rates. But sort of put simply, there's about 1 in 4 bonds that come to market is labeled in Europe and about 1 in 6 globally. But the challenge is not really growth in the number of issuers doing green bonds. It's the transparency, quality, and impact of those bonds. So generally speaking, if the volume of green bonds stays the same, but the quality improves and the structures that come to market, that is good for the integrity, the trust that people are trying to build. One of the categories that's had a bit of a bumpy ride is the sustainability-linked instruments. So they're the general corporate purposes. The other ones are sort of what's determined as use of proceeds. And it's just been a struggle for investors to sort of agree or accept or price in the credibility of the KPIs and targets that they've seen. But we have to have some transition or sustainability linked loans, bonds, because companies, either by size or by their operations and what they do, there isn't always that CapEx, OpEx eligible projects to fund use of proceeds instruments. So there is a need for something that sort of blends into the transition finance. So there's a whole new lingo or bingo in sustainability, and it's all around transition. So you'll hear people talking about transition plans, transition planning, transition bonds, and transition finance. So effectively, there isn't enough assets or green assets to get to a 1.5 degree net zero scenario. So there needs to be some acceptance that just green assets won't get you to where you want to get to. Transition is kind of dynamic. It's not really a product. It's about how you sort of move from A to B. And there should be some linkage with business strategy, sustainability strategy, and your transition strategy. There should be some linkage between them or level of integration at least. But effectively, it's the need for an entity level forward-looking disclosure around ambition and targets and how a company is going to get there. I think I'm just about doing okay for time. The transition finance is trying to effectively zoom out beyond activities, which is what kind of green bonds focus on. So, but the problem is, like anything new, it's the scalability and credibility of transition bonds or transition finance and how we get there. The incoming sort of fund labels, so sustainability improver is going to be a category, and that might be helpful for the transition market. And again, it's moving from labels to outcomes. Lastly, you've got another new acronym to learn or digest or hear about, and it's EU green bonds. So EU green bond standard is an objective of further raising the environmental ambitions of the green bond market. It's aligned to the taxonomy, the EU taxonomy of sustainable economic activities, and the allocation of at least 85% of the proceeds to EU taxonomy aligned activities. So it's kind of the gold star, if you like, or the gold plated, going beyond the ICMA sort of principles. And the key questions are, will we see, so the first EU green bonds can be published not sooner than the 21st of December 2024. So unless people are very active around Christmas time, I guess we will see them in January. And how they'll change or evolve from the sort of ICMA aligned green bonds, and will there be additional demand from investors? I will see if we've got 8 seconds to do 4 questions. ESG fatigue came up on the wall of worries. Please share your thoughts. I guess, I can't, it's going to be here. So however you define, I think ESG is quite a sort of polarized acronym and hard to sort of define. Do you do good ESG? Do you sort of do good IT? But sustainability, sustainable finance markets, CSR, DEI, ESG, they're going to be here. It's going to be a core part of businesses' operating strategy, business strategy. And a lot of companies set their sustainability strategy as the strategy. How do we continue to attract talent, people, whilst obviously still making profits and having a less negative impact on the planet? That is the challenge, but companies are addressing that. And I don't think ESG fatigue will come up. The labeling, I think, also gets a little bit of sort of discussion. It's a wrap, it's a marketing thing, a green bond, but it's still bond and finance, and investors need to do their due diligence in order to satisfy questions that they get from asset managers, asset owners. So they'll continue to need to be the frameworks, disclosure, regulation, and standard setting that you've seen. How can country like? So the smaller one, that's where, or smaller companies, sorry, in terms of the third question that I can see on this list, it's not all only available or applicable to the big players. The bigger players get to use these sort of green bonds, if you like, or market the green bond or social or sustainable. But at the core of it, a ESG rating, measuring and defining a company's business activities and how they impact the environment and society, and the outcome of a company's sustainability strategy is really important. And that's for everyone. There'll be stakeholders, employees, investors, lenders that need to get comfort that you are on the right path or that you're doing the right thing in order to progress against your own plans and targets. I'll probably stop there because otherwise I'm going to be booted off the stage. But thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you have a good rest of your conference.
Thank you, Greg. And I think that's a valuable lesson that there was a lot of interest in ESG. Maybe next year we will have a more expanded session since there was so much interest in it.